My name's John with the Line Mezzanine Men's Bible Study. I want to go over our review on discipline. It's a pretty vague term, discipline. Discipline what? Smack a kid, discipline? Kid cries, goes away. No, we're not talking about smacking kids. That's pretty mean. But, like Proverbs says, you can't spare the rod on a kid, otherwise, kid's not going to be disciplined. That's a whole nother issue right there. If you're going to comment on that on YouTube or Facebook, do it at your own risk, please. But in any case, we're going to talk about discipline of the tongue, of the mind, and of the ears. And we're going to pick out, I guess, some pretty conventional verses that talk about the mind, the ears, and the tongue, but we're going to put it in the context of discipline. This will be a little lengthy video, but I'll try to be brief. I want to thank Ben Waldrop, Bill Munsey, and Neil Weintraub for helping lead this expositional study together, split up into 3 groups, and we focused on these 3 readings and then brought it back together and basically introduced those ideas to the whole group and got the whole picture out of it. So I'm going to try to give you that whole picture now. So let's go to James 3 right now. First off, James 3. Let's go there. And I'm going to put my Bible bookmark over the next one. Taming the tongue. James talks a lot in 3, the first half, about taming the tongue. The second half, after verse 13, talks about wisdom, but it connects very well to taming the tongue, because if you're seen to have wisdom and if you're seen to be a wise person, usually it's connected to what you say. So that's where the tongue comes in. I think it's wise of James to write about the tongue before talking about wisdom instead of the other way around. Here, James talks about how powerful the tongue is, how the tongue is, in verse 5, likewise the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. And he says in verse 8, but no man can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil, full of deadly poison. So how can we have discipline of the tongue if we can't tame it? Well, we can tame it or discipline it by having a discipline of spirit. Because as we see earlier, as we see in Matthew and throughout the Gospels, Jesus talks about what comes out of the mouth as being the upwelling of the heart and what can make a person unclean. When prompted by the Pharisees, oh, Jesus, you're eating unclean foods. Doesn't that make you unclean? No, it's not what you eat that makes you unclean. It's what you say that makes you unclean. So Jesus established that there, and James follows up very well by saying, well, you're going to praise out of your mouth, but at the same time, you're going to be cursing. He says this in verse 10 and then follows up in verse 11. Can both fresh water and salt water flow from the same spring? Can that fresh water of praise from our mouth flow as well as the salt water from our mouth? That salt water of cursing, of just tearing people down, of trying to tear God down, or just degrading self, degrading others. That's what you have to consider when disciplining the tongue. And then following that, when you discipline the tongue by having a discipline of the spirit and a discipline of the mind, then you get to have wisdom. And as James says, but the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Very much kind of like the fruits of the Spirit in Galatians 5, chapter 5, verses 22 through 23. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control, I believe, are the 9. If I missed one, I'm sorry. I'm not going to say the 9 again. So that's, the discipline of the tongue. Connecting that, we talked about discipline of the mind. So let's go to that right now. We're going to go to Matthew 5, and we're going to talk about discipline of the mind. But this is interesting because Matthew 5, you don't really talk about the mind. You talk about the effects of the mind. Here, I started out with verse 21, talking about how Jesus teaches about anger or controlling anger. Then he teaches about lust, then divorce, then vows, then retaliation, then loving enemies. What is the common thread with all of these? If you read through how Jesus talks about anger, he puts mercy first, puts others before self. When he talks about lust, he puts us aside, less us, more God. So it's displacement, basically, pushing us out of our mind and putting God in place of that, putting the Spirit in that. As Bill Munsey pointed out, actually, during Bible study, it's kind of like having a water bottle. If you have an Aquafina water bottle or a Dasani or whatever favorite water you love, imagine the water being the Spirit and that emptiness being sin. And the more you fill that bottle up with the liquid, the more Spirit you have and the more you displace the sin. But the emptier the bottle is, the more air you have, and that's where the sin is. So I thought that was very good, and I think in the end, it's all about displacement of sin with Spirit, and to do that, a great way is mercy. Same thing with the vows. Make your yes, yes, and your no, no. Anything beyond your, that with your vows comes from the devil. Don't say, I swear up and down, left and right. No, don't do it. Look at verses 33 through 37 about that. So that's really discipline of the mind. And, if you have that, you also have discipline of the tongue. Now, what about discipline of the ears? That's the part where we're looking at, what comes in, through our ears. We talk about the mind, what we're thinking about, and oftentimes the mind is the result of what the Spirit upwells. The upwelling of the Spirit ends up in the mind and then goes out to the tongue, and then the whole world knows about what's in our heart. So, what about the ears? Well, the ears definitely influence what we have. And here we talk about the parable of the four soils. Very popular parable. But something that Neil pointed out, Neil Weintraub in our Bible study pointed out, is that oftentimes we go through seasons. I think that was a very good analogy, the seasons that we go through. You could have people with these be one type of soil. Many times these people will be these four types of soils at different points in their life. Sometimes there's going to be a drought. Sometimes there's going to be a storm. Sometimes there's going to be a flood. Sometimes there's going to be thorns around. And you could relate those times to seasons, how they affect the soil. Droughts make soil rocky. You have weeds around as a result of seeds. Maybe people introducing seeds, maybe having that bad influence around. You have seeds creating weeds, and then it chokes the word. Maybe you have floods. It floods out the word. All the seeds can't root, can't establish. So if you parallel not just the goodness and the richness and the ability of the soil to have a seed established in it, just parallel to you at one point in your life, but maybe expand that to several points in your life. Expand that to, say, years. What kind of seasons do you go through? What soil do you encounter, or what soil are you in the summer, in the spring, during school, after school? Maybe your soil changes on a daily basis. Maybe it changes weekly, monthly. Maybe you have trends, moods. Think about the soil that you are. Not just, oh, these are the types of soil that receive the word well and I should be the best, but when am I the other types of soil and why? What causes me to change soil types? So, a good look at the parable of the four soils from that perspective. Again, James 3, Matthew 5, and the last one, discipline of the ears, Luke chapter 8, verses 1 through 21. Those are the three readings we went over. I'm John from the Mezzanine Men's Bible Study. Comment right here down below, and I want to hear what you want to say, and I want to hear your feedback. So, ciao.